So we got plenty of questions, so they'll have no problem running through all these. These guys have promised to answer every single question as long as it takes. So we'll be here all day. So we're going to go for a little while, and then I could ask Zena maybe or somebody to just kind of give me a time check. We'll get through the stack. We'll go as far through as we can, and yeah, we'll see where we go from here. So thanks for all your input. Okay, so first question, and I'd like to address everybody here. Actually, you know what? Sorry. Let me do some introductions first. So apologize. Let me do introductions. First, I have Olivia March. I'm just going to let you do your own introduction. How's that?
I work at the ACCC, so the Australian Competition Consumer Commission, in the energy regulation sector. We have 6 Drupal websites, and I've just been involved in the development of the most recent one and previous government and education experience.
And I'm Vesa Palmo. I'm the CEO of Wunderkraut. Wunderkraut was formed last summer by merging some European Drupal shops, namely Crimson, Meara and Node1, and including some private individuals. So we are today 150 people focusing only on Drupal in 9 European countries. So it's rather distributed organization for now.
I'm Felipe Rubin, Chief Architect with CINT, which is a Brazilian company. We have about 1,600 people, but about 300 developers or talents in Drupal spread out across Brazil, China, and Argentina. So doing global support and development for organizations, farm organizations from US with global reach, pretty much.
And I'm Jeff Walpole. I'm the CEO of Phase 2 Technology, based in Washington, D.C. and New York. So I'm the token United States representative here. So okay, so our first question is: using open source different than proprietary for enterprises, and if yes, why? So how is open source different for enterprise organizations?
I mean, from the companies I have worked before or currently working on, the challenge when it comes to using open source and compared to proprietary in terms of support, for example, that's the first thing that comes. But later on, as they start adopting open source, that really gets mitigated. So in the end of the day, it goes down to the license fees and that part related to it, and really getting to know and how to work with the community and work with something that they don't have so much control when compared to calling to a company or to a proprietary model organization. I guess that's one of the big differences that I felt when selling Drupal or positioning Drupal within large enterprises, and they were used to that proprietary model, and then they need to change the mindset and really get the benefits out of the Drupal community, which is basically, in my view, the flexibility and time to market. So that's something that was really different for those organizations.
Yeah, I think the real bigger difference is if you're working with somebody with, let's say, a single vendor CMS against the big ecosystem, if it's open or closed. I think that's the largest difference with potential vendor lock and so on. That being said, with some commercial products, you might not get what you really want, and sometimes it's impossible to get some new features in and these kinds of things. But I don't think if that's really all that common. I would dare to say that there are not that many differences. The community aspect is a big difference, because you can't just pay money for somebody to support it, or you can, but that's not going to be enough in all cases if you are like large-scale Drupal user, for example. But mostly, I don't think it's a major difference, actually.
I don't think you get much of a difference from the user level, but I think in terms of the executive level and trying to sell it up, there's a perception that open source isn't as safe or secure. But there's also a lot of noise in the open source sort of market, whereas a single vendor, you know who you're talking to in open source. The message can get confused, especially at a non-technical level.
Great, great. Now a very provocative question. So, do you genuinely think that Drupal is amazing, or is it simply the best there is? I.e., is it just the best poo in a pile of poo? I'm not making this up. This is what people write. What's that? Yes, you can tweet that. Just don't attribute it to me. What do you think?
I don't think I'll use the same language. I don't know if it's the best. I do kind of look at everything in terms of the best tool for the job. It is one of the better, that's for sure, but I don't think there's any perfect solution that fits everyone.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go with the poo one, but I personally have some sort of love-hate relationship with Drupal, and it lacks a lot of things. But that being said, it's the best solution out there currently. So definitely the best option for large enterprises, at least.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. There's no silver bullet, and one important thing is about the right tool for the right job, right? So I'm like you. I have also the hate and love thing with Drupal. So I've seen cases where people chose to use Drupal and just screw up by using that for the wrong purpose. So I think that's the overall plan, anyways.
Did you want to caveat that those were not the official thoughts from the Drupal Association and your board seat? I'll do that for you. Okay, this is a pretty simple question, but it's also a very complex question, and it's one that I think a lot of us get a lot, which is, what's the real competition for Drupal? And of course, we realize that different sizes and in different places, it's different. So I think it's interesting, mainly from a regional perspective, to hear what you're seeing in the countries that you're in. And I'd also be interested in terms of size. Is it large enterprises, is it different than what you're seeing as sort of simple website building software?
That's a really good question, and we have physical offices in 9 different European countries, and for us, each market is different. If you look at the competition today, I can't say there would be like one primary competitor, and definitely it also comes to the scale as well. Somebody could say WordPress is the biggest competitor for Drupal. In enterprise level, that's definitely not the case today, but that may be the case in a few years if you look at how WordPress is moving forward today. But I would say it's mostly proprietary software solutions which are different from market to market. They range from Java to Microsoft to whatever, basically. I think our list of primary competition has something like 20 products today. And as I said, different from one country to another. I would be interested to hear what those are in the Australian market, though.
Yeah, me too. I'm not gonna risk and take some names, but in my past 2 experience when selling Drupal, and I'm more focused on large enterprises, there was just a couple of 2 that were standing out there against Drupal, and Drupal in the end was just the SBS case was the winner, but was more a Java one. I think Oracle was called Fatwire. So and also in Brazil. So that case was in US first. So even in US for a Fortune 50 pharmaceutical company, they chose Drupal on top against this Oracle Fatwire. And also in Brazil, Oracle was really big over there with the new CMS product, which I forgot the name. But I was a big contender with Drupal over there. So that's what I've been facing more in terms of competition, but it's still. And my focus, our company is more towards digital marketing, so all the sites that we've been building is not specific use case like LMS or government, but it's more like final sites or websites for consumers. So that's where Drupal is really standing out, even with such proprietary solutions.
If I can quickly add actually something. Funnily enough, I'm currently based in the UK, and our biggest competition there is everything but Drupal, because there are so few big Drupal shops. So quite a few customers have been recently leaving Drupal because they've been so disappointed that they can't find proper big Drupal vendors to actually help them out. And they've been leaving to Java or Ruby on Rails and to commercial solutions and to all sorts of directions. So like big part of my job in UK at the moment is to sell our competition. Tell that we have great competitors here, and you're not gonna get stuck with us if you wanna pick Drupal. Sort of funny place to be at, trying to upsell your competition all the time, but in some of our markets, that's what we absolutely have to do, like every day.
Okay, I've got a few. In government, it's pretty much better the devil you know often, and it's often a Microsoft solution. Kentico is the latest one that's been pushed a lot. But then you're competing with legacy systems, so people are used to SharePoint. They don't refer to an intranet, they refer to SharePoint. They don't know the difference. So it's in terms of they don't know the difference between CMSs or that there are more than one. In Victorian government, it's very much My Source Matrix, which I hate. So I guess it depends. In terms of the education sector, it's either Moodle or Blackboard in Australia.
Great. Oh yeah, sure. In the U.S., I'd say definitely WordPress. WordPress and Joomla for open source CMS on the more sort of ubiquitous CMS side. Larger enterprises, I would say Adobe CQ5 tends to be the thing that is cropping up the most, and seems to be competing with Drupal and doing a good job at it at the top level. Tends to demo real well, shows real well. Don't know how well it actually works, but I'm sure one of the fine folks from Acquia can whip up all the research on how it compares. Next question I have for you guys is a little bit more of an architectural question, and the beauty of sort of crowdsourcing our questions like this is you get a variety of different perspectives and what people are interested in. And this one's a little bit more architectural, so bear with me. But the trend in enterprise solutions seems to be to serve many, many websites in a traditional IT systems approach. And then it's a question, why not produce many, many individual sites as disposable IT solutions? So you never have to upgrade, you just rebuild. You have no cross-site integration issues, and you keep up the pace of fast and light web. So in other words, using Drupal as open source without licensing fees, can we build disposable websites faster and cheaper than building a monolithic platform?
I think you can say there's pluses and minuses. Migration of content is always going to be an issue, so if you've got a standard format and can automate that. But in my experience being sort of government sector and education, people want the information they want, they don't want to hang out. So the second you move a resource or you move a page even, you'll get handwritten letters, emails, everything. I worked at the Bureau of Meteorology for a while, and I think they moved where one of the forecasts for farming was, and the number of complaints that were made just because they changed one level of architecture was insane. So if you're creating multiple disposable sites, there's not many people that want to sort of invest the time to relearn how to use your site unless you have quite a dynamic audience. So I think in terms of consistency of user experience is probably the main risk in that one.
I think one of the great sides of Drupal is that you can do so many things with it, and I find that we do three things all the time. We do massive sites that have everything in one site and multi-site profiles, whatnot. We do platform as service kind of sites internally for customers where they can deploy 50 or 500 sites internally. Let's say a big university, for example, they're going to end up having hundreds, if not thousands, sites internally, and that's more like platform as a service kind of thinking. And I find we also do quite a bit of I don't know if they're exactly disposable. You think of them as disposable, but it's really difficult to get rid of the sites in the end. But sometimes it is actually really good to quickly just whip up a site with a small budget, and the developers tend to hate it because it's not as challenging, because you can do it out of the box with Drupal really fairly easily. But sometimes it's really a good solution for the customer. So I would say there's no single right answer to the question.
Yeah, I agree too, and I think Olivia hit the point about consistency. So again, with the customers we've been working on, they came from an area or a scenario where they have hundreds, thousands of websites dispersed, pulverized across the organization, different departments, different requirements, and it was a madness to maintain all of that and be able to provide the same experience. One department would hear from the other department about the benefits they would have on that website, and they wanted it all. And then sometimes a different technology, so we started losing control across a large enterprise. So keeping consistency is really key for IT department to maintain and manage the platform.
Yeah. So I would like to add as well. I think that from my perspective and my company's perspective, like Vessa's, we've done a variety of these different platforms. What I find most interesting and most fascinating and helpful about Drupal is that it's capable of doing all those things. So the SBS case study earlier, where you've got a large platform and you insert Drupal into a stack that includes a variety of other things, is possible. The disposable website concept is also possible. We've done that for a publisher where they have a very strong content repository and a system of feeds and APIs, and we were able to spin up hundreds of websites that you just throw away when you're done, that are just not even really more than a standard theme, some CSS changes, and they just inherit content from this feed. And when you're done with them, you don't need them anymore. All the content resides in the repository. So it's interesting that we can do all those things. Transitioning to a few individual questions based on your experience. Felipe, someone wants to know, what is your biggest frustration and pain point operating a software development company?
I guess, and I think it would be more like Drupal related, right? Or
yeah, sure.
so if I can stick with that, when we started with Drupal, first was really the learning curve and training and getting resource. And once we reach a certain level, we established our own training center within the company. Then it was mitigated. After that, working with different customers, I guess, would be the mindset of open source, working with customers that we're not used to, and then being able to manage the whole modules, which platforms would be created based on those modules for those customers. And of course, the developers wanted to use different modules that are out there and then be able to manage correctly with the right customer and the right modules for that. I guess from a Drupal perspective, that's the biggest challenge from a project manager, from my team, when dealing with the developers and be able to keep up with what the Drupal community is putting out there for us to leverage.
Oh no, hold the mic. So this one's specifically for Vessa. Vessa, since the formation of Wunderkraut last year, how has the scale of a larger Drupal company assisted you in winning against other enterprise competitors?
Well, it has and it hasn't. I think it hasn't really helped us to win more business for Drupal as such, because at least in European market currently there are not that many big and credible Drupal players. There are really big IT giants like Accenture and Capgemini there, but when you actually have a look at how much resources they have, they are relying mostly on freelancers today, and they have some of their own teams, but they haven't really built up the competency. So our goals with all of the merger and everything we did were like one of the goals was to create a bigger and more credible player for big enterprises, because they just don't want to work with shops that have 10 or 20 people on staff. They find it's too scary to work with small players often. I don't know why, but that's their policy. So it is definitely helped us to win a lot of business when we compete against other Drupal vendors, but that's not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to expand Drupal. So in that, yes, it's been helpful, but we would need to have a couple more Wunderkrauts in order to make a really big splash. So if somebody wants to do one for Australia, why not? But I think my answer is yes and no.
Okay, and now for both of you, a question from your panel mate here. What are your pet peeves when responding to tenders or in dealing with customers? What can and should be done differently by the customer specifically?
That's always a difficult question, because you get all sorts of requests for proposals. Half of them are complete crap, to be honest. Half of them are okay or excellent. My biggest problem with those is usually the legal department when they get involved, because we do only agile projects, and that's a nightmare for most legal departments. So they want to know everything ahead of time, and everything has to be fixed schedule, budget, scope, everything. And I think that's the worst thing for us. So if I would have to just name one thing, it would be the design first kind of thinking that especially many of the large enterprises are still into, and public organizations often as well. Luckily that's changing slowly, but today it is the like primary problem I have.
On my side, something I guess similar would be work with the customer in partnership. So when it comes to RFPs, we've been discussing later about a new RFP that comes out, and then you get the whole team set up for that, and then the customer just cancel that, and you have all the team ready to start a Drupal excellent team, and then you just have to think about what to do with the development. And even when you have an agreement with the customer for 6 months or a year, the change will come, and there's sometimes not so much partnership in terms of working with your vendor and making the best usage of that team to help your business. I guess that's, as a system integrator, that's one of the biggest pains. And that goes across the large organization. Different departments, they just wouldn't worry about only about what their business are, not so much about what they can deliver. I don't have an answer for that. It's really, we also use Agile. We try to, we show them by using a dedicated team for a long time. It's better for them to get to know your business. So not only the Drupal learning curve, but learn the business. So trying to get a long-term commitment, that's only beneficial for them. And that's where Agile really gets into place with the Scrum methodology that we use 100% as well. And when we are able to show to some of the customers, they really get into that. And then we have a partnership for a few years. But there's still some businesses, some large enterprise that have a hard time getting into that model. So that's where we struggle. Our project managers, business directors struggle to convince to get on board with that model.
So Jeff, what's yours?
All the above, maybe. So we see a lot of delays in RFPs or tenders. Customers that put them out and then take a long time to make decisions. That's frustrating. I think also just customers not realizing the right level of detail that's helpful to a vendor. So, you know, if you're putting out a tender for something that's you know, a Drupal site, and you're specifying modules or versions or anything like that, or you're talking about content types or taxonomy or nodes, you've gone too far. Stop and refocus on what problems you're trying to solve, and let the vendors who are responding prescribe the appropriate technical implementation. I think that's probably the number one that we see more often. So, yeah, sure. We're making this interactive.
Now that you get me started, I think one of the
You gotta keep it going.
Yeah. One of the really big mistakes some customers do, they don't really reveal their budget at all. It's like you would go and try to build a house, and they ask like, okay, how much can you afford to invest? Well, whatever. Give me an offer for a house. It's, you know, just you can't tell for some cases unless you have some idea what the budget range is. And it's, I've been also buying services, and I always put in like exact amounts, like, well, this is what it can cost. So let us know what the quality would be on that and everything, instead of just trying to get the lowest possible price. Because this is absolutely, buying a website is like buying a car or a house without defining anything else. If you just get the cheapest one, you'll know what you end up getting. So.
So changing gears a little bit, we've talked quite a bit today about technology platforms. Let's talk about content, because obviously content is the most important aspect, the reason that we have a content management system to begin with. Olivia, can you tell us a little bit about any lessons you have in terms of incorporating legacy content, migrating content, things like that in terms of Drupal implementations?
I'm a big fan of automatically sort of scraping and reloading as required. But if you're looking at a distributed website or a legacy website that's potentially built in something like Lotus Notes, you're not going to get that sort of, you're not going to be able to really leverage that. So I think procedures and policies come first. So how often do you review content? What is archive content? And sort of what is necessary? One thing we have done is across sort of agency, across departmental team. So people from the different business units that represent the content have come along to web training, have come along to accessibility training, have come along to writing for the web, and it's their responsibility to manage the content within their area, whether it's migrated or whether it's archived. So putting it back on the business units that created it and setting a standard to meet for future.
So part governance in the order that you tackle things, but then also ownership. Right. Okay. Good. So I like to ask all of you, because I think this is probably a good question for everybody to be thinking about. But what are the biggest blockers for the enterprise to sharing their code back to the community? So what examples have you seen in which people are doing a good job of sharing their code back, and examples maybe where they're not, and why?
I have two customers, one on each side. One just started Drupal a year ago, large enterprise as well, but the right mindset. So the background of the person, the decision maker that chose the platform across the organization globally, he started with that. So we wanted to build something. We're going to be leveraging what's out there in the community, and I wanted to give it back. And you, Felipe, as a vendor, you do have authorization to whatever code that is not specific to our business, you guys can do it, make it perfect, and give it back to the community. The other organizations just, they don't have this mindset. They don't have the people with that. It's just the whole background. Think about proprietary. Think about scary, what that means. Put a code out there, and I could really sacrifice my business if I do it. And so it's really hard to sell them, even though we tried a few times. So I don't have an answer how to convince that, because I haven't convinced the other organization to do that yet. Slowly, talks are happening as they see, but it's really, my experience is really having the right person and really trying to focus on that person within the organization, the decision maker that's going to be responsible for the platform, and since the beginning. So we're going to be building this, and we wanted to give it back, because you're leveraging this and that from the community, and that's just the right thing to do. But there's no real recipe or happy way for that, I guess.
Yeah, I fully agree on the mindset. That's the primary thing. The traditional enterprise mindset is that every paper says confidential on it, basically. Even if you look at like toilet paper or whatever, it's always confidential, everything. And you are trying to patent everything if you can, and then take all of your competition to the courts. That is pretty obvious these days if you read the news on what Apple and friends are doing in the courts. You try to get patents on everything. So that's the traditional mindset. And moving from that mindset to, hey, let's work together with our competition to create more value for us, it's a pretty big leap. So it's something that in many, especially in high-tech companies, I think it's a way too big of a leap to do at once. So we have a lot of customers who do contribute back quite a bit, but none of them are actually in industries where it's really traditional to try to patent and make everything confidential. They are more in like media and public sector and so on, different kinds of verticals. So I think the only way to actually convince them to contribute is to show them success stories. We have really lovely stories from our existing customers where they have been doing, let's say, upgrade from Drupal 5 to 7, and the custom modules we originally wrote for them have already all been upgraded for free to Drupal 7, because so many sites use those modules already. So they ended up saving a lot of money. And we have these kinds of stories to tell, but I think they only work if the mindset is even somewhat in the same neighborhood. If it's completely on the closed side and nothing leaves this building ever unless somebody pays money for it, then it's going to be obviously really, really difficult to sell.
I don't think I've got much to add. I think the business cases that have worked, you're always trying to change the mindset, but try and change it at the start rather than the end of the project. And if dealing with government, always address security concerns.
Yeah, I think I have two examples to add. One is in the government space and public sector. I think the argument there is reuse. I think the argument you can make successfully is reuse. So if one government agency has developed something that meets a certain regulation, and presumably done it with public funds, why would that same a different agency have to go out and procure the same solution twice? So that's a very academic argument. You get into the specifics and it becomes very difficult. But I think that's something that appeals to most people in public sector. Our experience on the commercial side or the enterprise side of things is very similar to Vessa's and Felipe's. It's different organizations with different mindsets around legal in particular. But the most compelling argument I've found is really just the dollars and cents of having someone else maintain that code for you and letting people know that if they put something back into the community, it's in essence being maintained for free. If they have to branch and do things on their own, they're in essence either paying their own staff or you as a vendor to potentially keep a branch of that code alive just so that they can use it down the road. And that's not a very good business argument. So you try to attack it from that. My experience with a lot of commercial companies is they don't react as well to the open source culture, if you will. It's more about the business sense. So, a specific question from an audience member about multi-sites, and I suppose also relates to governance in terms of how you manage users within your implementation. With multi-sites, what are the cost, support, and security implications, especially around people grabbing cool third-party components? So I'm assuming this is about stopping rogue users from installing and using components on a multi-site architecture.
I think this is, in the end, it's not a technology question as such. It's more about what sort of policies do you have in place, what sort of best practices you have in place, how do you train your people. You obviously don't let just anyone install modules on any of your Drupal installations, or if you do, I think you have all sorts of problems anyway. But if your crazy developers just go on and always install something and things break down, I think the problem is actually in some other place than your Drupal multi-site installation. It's about your culture of how do you work and what your quality practices and so on. I don't really think there even is a technical silver bullet for this, but of course some of our devs might disagree with me on this, so I don't know. But I really think it's a people question more or less.
I mean, you could implement a lock-in so to prevent people from developers adding modules, but it's not part of the standard. I guess you got it right. I mean, governance is it's really one of the customers is basically defining what's going to be their platform, which means what's going to be the set of modules that got to be reused, and those are the standard modules as my organization. If we need to add a new one, it has to go through some enterprise process, which might delay the time to have that module available in the platform, but it's really worth to prevent the rogue developers from adding anything they want, making sure that they're getting really stable modules, not just beta versions. If you're getting a beta version, you get some sort of blessing. But of course, without incurring on the traditional take a long time to add a module process, right? It still has to be agile, has to be fast, but some sort of control you gotta have in place to prevent that. But really not technical. It's really about ensuring you're doing the right thing and maintaining.
One more thing to add on that might be that building an organization where when something gets pushed to production, it's not like these developers can do whatever, and then you have the maintenance guys to clean up the mess. Make them clean up their own messes. When they break everything a few times and they have to clean it up and they have to explain to the customer why everything broke down, it sort of discourages them to do like the craziest things at least. So that might be an easy fix in some cases.
So, related question about about how to handle coordination amongst people developing on Drupal. How do you manage global development teams with a multi-site setup? So, when teams need to develop on separate sites but also share some global functionality, how do you handle that sort of coordination amongst those different parts? And I would think that Felipe might be good.
Yeah, it's a good question. We have one big case where we serve a multi-site instance of Drupal in Europe, so about 15 to 20 countries now, I guess. And we start the support of that platform in Brazil and follow the Sun method or process. China continues that on the next time zone, right? So there's some intersection, but still, how do we do it? So we use tools, so we make sure that we use Jira, all the communication goes smooth between the teams, and of course the repository, the source code is shared. But I guess the key is communication. There really isn't, even if it was a multi-site, if it was just a regular site, would be the same. It's just process, tools, and communication, and that's how we're achieving that. It's being a success right now. But as far as multi-site, I don't see, from a development standpoint, it's really about all the developers in both countries knowing how to deal with the code. Of course, before transitioning to China, we started in Brazil, and then to China, there was a knowledge transfer phase, make sure that the team could handle that. But just like you said, business as usual, you got to make sure that you're gonna have your team spread out, so the key part is communication, how you manage communication. So there are quite a few alternatives for that.
Yeah, we have a bit different situation where everybody is within 2 time zones, basically, so communication is a bit easier. Based on my personal experience, what I would say, like, make it work locally first. It's quite typical to go into distributed teams right away, but if it's possible, try to get everybody in the same room in the beginning when you are starting and grow it out from there. Especially if you are trying to learn something new, like let's say you want to transform your organization into being agile. It's really difficult to do in the beginning if it's a distributed organization. It's much easier to do in the beginning when somebody is in the same room and the communication is quite a bit easier. That's the first thing. The second thing we do in order to get people work cross borders is to basically make sure they meet face to face and drink some beer, more or less. That's the thing. So we airlines like us, but of course those are short flights. So we get people together when we get new people, and we have a lot of projects where we have mixed teams because our markets are in between of, let's say, the UK and Latvia. The price difference can be, it's not exactly tenfold, but almost. So there are like massive price differences on the markets. So Latvians can easily work to UK, but if we send somebody from the UK to a Latvian customer, that's going to eat up the budget really quickly. So we can mix between markets, but we have to be a bit careful on how to mix. So mostly what this means is we just send people to stay at another office for extended periods, like weeks or months, because working together is really all about knowing the people as well. So initially they meet face to face, and when they actually get to know the teams and know the people, then it's no longer so important. You have to meet every now and then, but not on a weekly or daily basis. We also do this if we have problems with the project. We get everybody on the same room, including the customer, and that tends to get problems fixed. So even with all the video conferencing and everything, the like FaceTime is still quite invaluable in that. I think there's like 1,001 other things, but
Yeah, I was going to go back to the governance as well. So once you establish the process, so who is going to be managing that platform, the global features, how that can be enabled across countries, and so going to make sure that all the teams are aware of how things can be done. So it's all about the governance of the platform.
Okay, another very provocative Drupal question, since it's after lunch and people need something. Try to give this one your most fiery answer you can give. There's one thing about Drupal that frustrates you. What would it be?
okay, only one. I don't get to name many. Yeah, I'm gonna say the logo sucks.
I would think the one thing that is I think is underway in Drupal 8 much better. I was just talking before this session. It's the whole move to production management. So that's something that is not perfect, and we know that other products do better this. So managing the pushes between stage and prod, and managing content in prod or staging. So depends on the maturity of your content author. So that's something that we had to either use a few modules like deploy module, etc., and customize a little bit based on the requirements. But in the end of the day, I always ended up creating scripts to manage that the way they need it. So I guess that's the part that we as a system integrator struggle more, because every customer want to do a different way, and there's not a single solution in the Drupal yet for that. You can do several ways, just like in this SBS case. There's different ways of doing things, and for that particular one, which I think is very critical, we should, as a community, eventually come out with 2 tops ways, or just one ideally, of doing those content and code and configuration pushes between the environments. I guess that's the thing that we as a management support, as well with the support, have to be very careful when pushing things in different environments.
Yeah, perhaps I can now try to answer for real. I got my brain moving. It's 3 in the morning for me, so sorry if I'm a bit slow. I think my personal favorite topic on what's wrong with Drupal today is Drupal marketing. There's us and Acquias and all sorts of other companies out there doing a lot of Drupal marketing on their own. So I'm sure all of the markets have 1 or 2 or 10 companies doing Drupal marketing all the time. And we are basically doing the same things over and over and over again. We've been trying to change this as we being the Drupal Association in this case, where I'm a board member as well. But it's slow going, and hopefully we get to change it at least slightly during this year already to pool all of the marketing things together. But it turns out doing open source marketing is quite a bit more difficult than technology, because in marketing you can't do branches and forks and everything all the time. Or you can, but it's not going to be really great marketing, and everybody wants to do different marketing messages. So I don't know. I hope we can do it, because at least I'm sick of paying for a lot of the European Drupal marketing on our own. I would much rather pay it together with everybody else. I'm sure Acquia feels the same way. So that's probably my favorite topic at the moment.
I'd have to agree with the rollout to production being a little bit messy and changing. But I guess the other thing is that like any CMS, it can get incredibly heavy incredibly quickly. I don't think there's a module for that. I think there's about 50 modules for that. And making the wrong choices for the organisation or for the solution can have a lot of consequences that the initial sort of phase doesn't really pick up. So I guess planning ahead and knowing the technology before you actually implement it.
Yeah, I would think no one had actually asked a question, so I'm going to insert my own question as part of this answer, which is talent. I think one of the things I've heard over and over again, and I think Felipe mentioned it earlier, Muzavesa, is, how many of you feel in general like you're struggling to get the right resources, either hired or contracted or whatever? Just show of hands. How many people are struggling? Yeah, and that's a decent number of people. So I guess let me ask you guys a question. How do you find good or develop or build good Drupal talent in the organizations that you work in?
Yeah, like I said before, we develop our own training center within the organization. So new developers, we get them, of course, knowing programming skills, having programming skills, basic, and then if they know PHP, that's of course one step ahead. Otherwise, they go towards the learning PHP first phase, and then go towards Drupal. And after a couple years, we'll be able to optimize this training in a way that we can do it in a couple weeks, and then have a developer almost as good as a guy that has been doing Drupal in 4 years. So, but before that, was really struggling to find that initially in Brazil, and getting resource that would know Drupal, the level that we needed to those people to know. I feel like there's a lot being done in that area. I remember Dries' keynote in Denver, I guess, last year about the talent pool. There was a kid in the pool. So the Drupal training day last year was, I think, the 4 editions were a success. There's a couple. There's 4 more happening this year as well. So I think things are getting better. Things are getting easier for us. Starting to hire in China. So was a better scenario than in Brazil when I started down there, and but still there's a bit of a challenge. But I think the association, the community are doing their best towards that area.
I think I have to do this in 2 different parts, because we are in a sort of a strange situation. We have too much people. People are applying jobs, and we have too many talented people applying for jobs. We just can't take all of them in, and it's like part of that is we've always focused only on 2 primary things: customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction, basically. And this actually, it's a small community, and we have a fairly solid reputation in the community, so people with experience apply for jobs. And we do have a lot of customer demand as well, but when it's a consulting organization, so you can't throw in people like, let's take 50 people in right now. That would just break down the entire organization, because you can only grow on a certain rate while still being profitable at the same time. So and this is all of the like there's all of these like Drupal hiring companies out there calling us every week like, do you need new people? It's like, no, we have like 50 people lined up for like new jobs as soon as we can take them in. But I realize that this is globally definitely not the situation, and even in Europe, most of our customers are trying to hire like small in-house teams, and they have huge difficulties hiring and so on. So what we've done on that part is we've done cooperation with universities and done some like free training in universities to mostly to promote Drupal, because if you go in for like 2 days or 3 days and you talk them about Drupal and you teach them how to do stuff with that, you're not gonna get like extremely talented Drupal people out of that. But hopefully you will get like people that are interested in Drupal and will learn it afterwards, and you will, in a few years' time, you will get a lot of Drupal talent. So training is one thing. Another thing, we are trying to push like actively some sort of Drupal certification program. That's another of my personal favorites as well, and going nowhere. But hopefully one of these days we'll have something like that. So those things I think are probably the ones I can think of.
We attack it in a few ways. We have some full-time staff who are developers and designers, and they have a fairly strong connection with one another and share learnings quite often. We hire in resources, whether it be individuals or consultancies, when we're doing bigger projects and need more resources. In terms of contracting out, we haven't always found the best company, but we've found some good ones lately. So I think it's a little bit of everything, making sure we're learning from previous projects and sort of upskilling while we go along. I will say, though, that I think Drupal could do with a little bit more promotion in Australian universities. I was working with some friends who are lecturers the other day, and they sort of said, what's going on in industry? What should we be teaching? I did mention Drupal, and apparently a whole lot of other senior academics had said anything but Drupal. So it does have a little bit of a perception problem in some areas, and I think that could go a long way. We do have some fairly talented programmers that are still in school and still in university, and I think tapping into that would be a huge bonus for Australia, because I know that we do at times have limitations.
Okay, so you're trying to convince your boss, your customer, someone that you believe needs to be on Drupal. What are the top things that you think make Drupal? What are the selling points for Drupal that you think are incredibly important for people to understand besides cost?
I'm going to go with one of my favourite ones that isn't used often enough. There is competition. I know I work for the Australian Competition Consumer Commission, but I've also worked in other parts of government where they've sort of locked themselves down to a single vendor technology, and just the impact on that and the delays that you can incur. So I do think that there's competition out there and that it's broadly used. I don't think people understand how often it's broadly used. So selling some of the success stories, but that there's also quite a few companies that support it and good ones.
I would go with the references, existing Drupal sites out there, and the community being the two primary things. These are really special for Drupal. Even if you compare against other open source communities and other open source products, it's pretty difficult to find any product that would have as great references as Drupal has globally.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's really to beat the almost 1 million developers, I guess, in the DO that we can see over there registered. It's really hard. So showing off the community, what you can get out of that community is basically what I sell is time to market. So especially for the commercial area, if you really wanted to get a module after a new social network has just come out a couple weeks ago, most likely going to have a module, like Zina said in the beginning. Someone has built that, so it's really fast for you to really keep up with the market. And that, along with flexibility as well, which gives you too much power, so you have to have control of that responsibility. But the flexibility of Drupal is really a key point when I'm selling to different organizations as well.
Okay, we're almost done. I'm gonna mix it up a little bit just to see if we can get our panelists back answering some tough questions. Throwing them a lot of softballs here. I wanna get a tough one out there. So, does anybody in the audience have a real stumper for this this crew up here? Anybody have a question you want to ask the panel right now? Live question. Something hard. Come on. All right. Ooh. Where will the web be in 10 years? Come on.
That's an easy one. I think it's going to be quite a bit like it's today. It's just going to be a lot more of everything and a lot more of everywhere.
Yeah, I guess probably goes down to the same point about the Internet of Things. Getting a little bit more technical about the APIs, so being able to provide, like I guess Biwa was saying in the keynote, about being able to provide data and services across the board. So I guess that's where we're going to be able to reach out to any API anywhere and get the data and provide business value for whatever we're building. So I guess that's the RESTful APIs. That's a key part. Evolving somehow in 10 years, definitely. But I think we're going to be sticking with this standard, which I think is great.
I do hope that big business and government sort of set the tone and do develop shared standards, and that there's not so much clutter and noise, and that it is a bit more open, because I am very strongly into equality of access for information. But I think there's also risk of it going the other way, and various countries around the world controlling and limiting access. So I do think that we have an incredible power, but we also have an incredible risk.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate all the great questions you had, and thank you to all the panelists for giving us your thoughts and your time. So, everyone, please thank the panelists.